Hasheider is our speaker for today. He had a transformational near-death experience, and he wrote of it in his book, which I love. Chapter 3 is the best chapter because it describes his vision of the universes collapsing together or extending forever. And if they were collapsed, you'll read about it. It's interesting. He can best tell his own story, so I'm going to turn it over to Philip.
Thank you, Dick. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation to share my story with your group. I am a Wisconsin farmer, a husband, and a writer, and I've written over 30 books on agriculture, farming, and family stories, and local history. The early October morning of 2015, when I went out to the pasture where we pasture grazed beef cattle at that time, which is something I did every morning just to check on them. It turned out to be an unusual morning, to say the least, and something totally unexpected. And as I walked out to look at the group of 24 head that were lying out in the middle of the pasture, I got within about 300 feet of the group, and one of them saw me coming and immediately jumped up and looked at me, perked her ears like she had seen a ghost, took off, running across the field, and stopped about 600, 800 feet away. Well, that was unusual because every morning I could normally go and walk amongst these cattle because I had been around them all the time. I could pet them, I could talk to them, I could just mill around with them, and they wouldn't bother to even look at me while they were eating. Well, her commotion caused all of the others to pay attention, and they jumped up and looked at me in the same way she did, and took off running across the field, and stopped when they got to the other cow, and they all stared at me. And I thought, well, this is really unusual. It had never happened before, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. I thought it was just an unusual occurrence, and so I had seen what I wanted to see. None of them were injured, needing attention or anything, and so I turned around and walked back towards the gate and towards our house. That morning I had scheduled to have the tires changed on our car in town, which is a village 12 miles from us. So I got ready to go into town to do that. Well, I got there much earlier than I had to, and it was at that point another juncture happened that morning that I had not anticipated, in that I instead of turning right to get my tires changed, I turned left and I went to our local hospital's fitness center. It's called Wellsprings. And I had been going there for the previous 6 months to exercise on the recommendation of my doctor because my blood pressure had steadily inched up, which there was no explanation for why it had done that because I had typically had low blood pressure. So I had been going there for 6 months, 2-3 times a week to exercise. And so instead of turning right to the place to get my tires changed, I turned left and went to the fitness center, parked, went downstairs, changed my clothes, went back upstairs, greeted the 5 staff members that were in the building, who I got to know fairly well, and stretched, got ready to do some exercises, went over to the arm curl machine, and I did 20 arm curls, and I stood up, and the strangest thing happened because both of my forearms were tingling, like they had fallen asleep when you lie on them and you get up and all of a sudden, they tingle. And I looked at both of my forearms And that's the last thing I recall for over 8 hours. What happened next was what I can only describe as an eternal dimension experience. And by that, I mean trying to use human words to explain what the experience was is really difficult because it is a dimension that does not use vocabulary. It does not use human words to convey information. It's all energetic. And I found myself, the best way I can describe it is on a raft of some sort. And I was sitting on this raft and I was floating. But I wasn't floating on water. I was floating on energetic waves that were coming at me. And not only were these waves that I could see coming at me, they were passing through me and continuing on. And at that point, I had no idea what this was, but it felt like someplace I had been before. Like when you go somewhere and you have this sense of deja vu. It was like that in an energetic sense. And when I did turn to look around, there were other, best word I can use is entities, who were also sitting on similar structures, rafts, if you will, and we were all floating together. I couldn't see them, I didn't talk with them, but there were millions of them, probably billions of them, just floating on these energetic waves. And I remember looking down at what were my hands, okay? And the interesting thing about them was that they were shaped like the hands I recognized, but they were translucent. I could see through them, and all these energetic waves kept coming through me, and they passed through my hands and went and continued on. And I thought, well, this is really, really interesting. At this point, I did not know that I had died. I did not know that I was lying flat on my back at the fitness center. I just knew I was someplace that was so welcoming and so warm that it felt so comfortable. I had no desire to leave. About that point, I looked up, and what I saw was, if you can imagine 1,000,000 or 10 million suns put together, and this was a gigantic orb, as we would understand a round sphere of energy. It was golden, it was glowing, it was pulsing, it was sending out all of these energetic waves that were coming at me and going through me and continuing on. And I could actually, as large as it was, I mean, it was like being in the biggest amphitheater I've ever been in. Even bigger than that, because there was no edges to it. There was no sky, there was no clouds, there was no depth from the standpoint of falling into some sort of a pit. It was just a warm, welcoming, loving atmosphere. And when I looked at it, all I could remember feeling was a sense of love, a sense of welcoming, a sense of acceptance. And why I was there, it wasn't even a thought that occurred to me at that point. That came later. Well, looking at all of this energetic waves coming out of this golden orb, this globe, is what I interpreted at that point as being the source of all creation, because everything was coming from it and passing into what was a area behind me. Not only was this what I considered a source of all creation, call it a God essence, if you will, a spirit essence. It's whatever you want to identify a human word with, the all knowledge, the all infinite knowledge that we can possibly imagine. Besides the energetic waves, I did notice that there were these little sparks flying out from this orb. I mean, billions of them. And they were on their way, flying by, going somewhere else. I had no idea where they were. I had no idea what they were, but they were born of whatever this infinite knowledge sphere was. Well, at that point, I decided to turn around to see exactly where I was, because it's kind of like going on a trip and deciding not to look down the side roads to see what's down there. So as I turn around, in the sense of us understanding how we would turn a body form of ours around, I could see what I can only describe as eternity. And by that I mean, the farther I looked into it, the clearer it became, with no end to it. And it would be like this energetic emulsion between me and the eternal distance acted as a magnifying glass that let me look and see into eternity, to make it clearer. And it was at that point that I saw all of these, what I will refer to as universes. And the best way I can explain this is to have you imagine, okay, we have this universe that's so many billion light years across, or up or down as we understand linear dimensions. And if you take everything within it, all the trillions and trillions of stars and suns and space and distance, and you compress it down to a single sheet of paper, and then you suspend it on a hook out here in this eternal dimension. And then right next to it is another one. And right next to that is another one. And so on. And you can keep going in a linear direction as we understand linear, both ways. And then you can do a vertical direction. There were all of these universes suspending themselves within this eternal dimension. And each one of them had a filament that I saw leading back to attach to this golden source of infinite knowledge. And so that was actually, it was very easy to accept it while I was there. I have more trouble now trying to comprehend all that, but at the time, I knew that this is what is out there beyond the sphere where we were. Well, it was about that point when what I remember of that dimension stops. And I later found out that was about the point in time where they restarted my heart. Now, what happened back at the fitness center was that I had collapsed, and the 5 people who were in the room dropped what they were doing and came over and immediately started CPR. The ambulance building was right across the street. They had been called, so they came flooding over. Personnel came flooding over. And later an ambulance was brought out for me. And I know this because about 6 months later, during my recovery, in trying to understand what happened, I interviewed all of the people who had a hand in rescuing me to get their perspective as I was trying to piece all this together of what happened. And it took them over 6 minutes to get my heart restarted. And once they did, they were able to transport me to a hospital in Madison, which was a half-hour away. And I was put into an emergency room. And then when I finally phased in, is the best way I can explain it, to understand that I was actually comprehending the scenery around me. I looked at the clock in the wall, so I know it was about 8 o'clock. And I said, well, that can't be right. And somebody asked me, well, why can't that be right? I said, well, time doesn't go backwards, because I knew I had been at the fitness center at about 11 o'clock, and now it was 8 o'clock, and that can't be right. And he said, well, no, it's 8 o'clock at night. And that was when I just kind of went quiet, because nothing at that point made any sense at all. So the 6 minutes that from my medical reports, the 6 minutes became the subject of what I wanted to write about. Now, the return of myself to this dimension caused a lot of confusion for me. I mean, a lot of things were happening all at once. There was the physical aspects where I was, recovering from basically being dead for 6 minutes. There was the emotional confusion, because I had no idea why I was in the hospital. I didn't realize I had collapsed, even though people were telling me I did. During those 8 hours, I was later. This was later. I was consistently told I was talking with the people in the ambulance on the drive down. I was talking with the ER people, doctors who were working on me, monitoring me. But I have absolutely no recollection of those 8 hours whatsoever. And that's fine. I don't need to remember all that. But what I did remember was that time that I spent in that eternal dimension. So not only was there the physical recovery, the emotional aspects, there was the effects on my family, who basically witnessed me in an emergency room situation when I had looked so good moments before. And there was the farm work, which really caused some challenges for Mary and myself, my wife Mary and myself. And on top of all of it was trying to make sense of what happened as I slowly recovered. Well, I was four days in the hospital and they sent me home. And then the process of trying to understand what happened took over. It was during the next 4 months that I felt this great need to understand what happened, understand why. I mean, why did it happen? Why did it happen where it did? Why did it happen when it did, when all that help was available? And why did I return? Those were all really confusing questions. It was this soup of trying to understand everything, trying to physically heal, trying to mentally heal, because I had been asked, well, how long do you think you were out? And I said, well, if I were to give you a time span, it felt like I was in that eternal dimension for centuries. It just felt that way, the sense of timelessness and space. And it was only 6 minutes, which really made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. So what I did was I got all my medical records. I had a stacker, 6 inches, 5 inches high. I interviewed the people who rescued me. And the interesting thing about that, at least it was interesting to me, was talking with them individually over a period of several weeks. This was 4 months later, each one of those people knew exactly what they did during that time, even though they had had other responses in between that. They knew exactly what they were doing, but they couldn't tell me what the person next to them was doing. They were that focused on it, which is why I think they remember exactly what they were doing. And with those witness testimonies to me, I was able to start to put it into some sort of a timeline. Now, at this point, I still had not heard about an NDE, what a near-death experience was. I had no idea that was a thing. I had not read any accounts. It wasn't within my radar of interest at that point before my collapse. I mean, it is now, but before that, it was not something I really worried about. And once I started to understand some of the things that had occurred, I started making notes to myself because, like I said, I've done a lot of writing. It was more for myself to try to understand not only the timeline, but what it was I experienced so that it was as fresh as it could be. But a lot of this took time because my brain really still wasn't as sharp as it had been before. It took a little while for the synapses to keep going. But eventually I came up with an explanation that at that point I was somewhat satisfied with. But I kept at it, and slowly I was able to understand why I was here, at least physically, because I had 2 blockages. It knocked my heart rhythm off balance, and so that's why I collapsed. It was an answer, but it still wasn't the answer as to why it happened, when it happened, where it happened. And those were the things that I really pursued because I was trying to make sense of it, not just that I had this extraordinary experience that I hadn't really mentioned to anybody other than Mary, and because I wasn't sure how anybody would look at it. I wasn't even sure myself at first that that's what happened. But writing out my thoughts did help me bring it to an area where I could start to understand. And then it brought me to the question again of why the collapse happened where there was all this help available. Why didn't it happen an hour earlier when I was out in the pasture with the cattle? Because there was only about an hour's difference between being out there and being in the fitness area. So the confusion continued for a long time. And at this point, I want to take a step back because I have to explain that this is my story. But it affects more than just me or anyone else who has had an NDE. It affects the family. It affects your spouse, your partner. It affects your friends. It's more than just the person that it happens to. There are after effects that really end up getting into the background. Mary, bless her heart, in an instant, had everything dumped on her lap. She had the farm work. She had the notifying of our friends and family. She had to keep up with them. She had to do the finances. She had to do the meals. She had to monitor me. She wouldn't let me go outside by myself. She certainly wouldn't let me run equipment on my own. Plus the fact that she had a full-time job. So without her assistance, I don't think I would have been able to make it to this point, because I had this extraordinary experience. I mean, it was wonderful, but she was left with all the chaos. And I'm grateful for her to stay with me. And it's been within the last year that we've seen some statistics now that where one partner or one spouse has an NDE, such as myself, and the other doesn't, and that the divorce rate is somewhere between 65 and 70%. Well, I feel very fortunate that she stuck with me, because it could have ended up much differently. So I'm going to jump ahead. About 10 months later, I had a second collapse. And this one was in the hospital's clinic reception area. And I had gone in because I hadn't felt good that morning. And again, I was back in the hospital. Mary was called. She had to drop everything she was doing at her job to come find me again. She didn't know that I was in the hospital that time, the second time. So the conclusion was that it was the medication that caused my second collapse. It wasn't a heart issue specifically. It had dropped, the blood pressure medicine they had given me had dropped it so low that I couldn't even function. I would come down in the morning and I'd be dog tired. I'd be up for 2 hours and I'd have to go down and lay down again. It was a real problem. Now, this was 10 months later, but in between my first collapse and my second, the director at our local hospital had heard about what happened to me and that I had recovered, and asked if she could come talk with me about my experience, or what I did experience. She was more looking at the physical aspects of what I remembered of my collapse and physical trauma that I might have had. So that's what our discussion revolved around, until I told her about my experience on eternal dementia. That did pique her interest. And about a week later, she called and asked if I would be willing to come to talk with the local emergency room nurses. And I said, yeah, sure. I'll come explain what I can. And so I met with them and explained my experience of what I've just told you. And it was really quiet for a while. And then one nurse asked, well, do you think you could have imagined all of that? And I said, well, at that point, I said, yeah, well, it's possible I could have. But how could I possibly remember all of the things I saw and witnessed and have been able to describe while my body was lying on the floor, heart not beating, I wasn't breathing, and not even knowing I was dead? How would that be possible for me to know that if it wasn't true. And it was at that point when I began to understand my experience a lot better. And it was another one of those little turning points where things started to make a little bit more sense. Now, thinking about her question and what I've tried to explain to others is that, okay, most of us have dreams during the night. I mean, I do. I'm sure many of you do. Most of the time, I can't remember a thing about the dreams. All I know is, yeah, I had something. You may get a little snippet. But dreams have a way of dissolving, diffusing into the fog, if you will, after you wake up. And it's really hard to put a finger on exactly what the dream was. Now, some people have very vivid dreams that they remember, and that's fine. But I think generally speaking, this is my opinion, that we have dreams a lot of us just don't remember. And maybe that's a good thing, I don't know. But the interesting thing to me is that I can now, over 8 years later, remember exactly the things I saw in that eternal dimension. That never changes. There has been nothing that I've deleted from what I've experienced because I didn't think it was there. Everything I saw or what I've written about is what is still with me. And it's as clear and as vivid now as it was when it happened. I can't explain that, but that's what it is for me. It may be for somebody else, but nothing of it has changed. Now, my understanding of it all has evolved. Yeah, I think that's natural. But in trying to understand all of what I did see and why, yeah, that's evolved, but not what I saw. In fact, I can be looking at any scene in front of me, and this eternal dimension is always in the background. I mean, it's not like it, in fluid colors or anything, but it's always there. I know it's there. And in a way that's very comforting, because then I know that what I experienced was really true. I mean, because there's not a dream that stays with me that long. So this couldn't have been a dream. So the other aspect of that, the dream essence versus the experience essence, is I am now convinced and believe that I experience more in that eternal dimension than I can remember right now. And I'm hoping that in the future, I'll remember more of what I experienced. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I mean, at this point, I'm not worried about it. I don't stress over it because I'm satisfied with what I did experience and knowing what's out there after we leave this body. So that anything on top would be just a little bit added, a cherry on top of the whole thing. But the experience also taught me that we have spirit guides, if you will. Some people may refer to them as angels, some people just guides. I believe we all have them. And I believe we all have them because I've met mine 3 different times. Can I quantify that? No. But I don't feel I have to. I can just explain what it was I experienced with them and then let others decide if they want to believe it or not. And I'm fine with because it's important that I believe it. So the first time was I was at a workshop with a conscious channel, and part of the workshop is it's all very energetic interaction, and he would mirror us. We would look at him when he came down the line, and he would show us ourselves in his eyes, in his face. And he came down and stood in front of me, and instantly I got this, it would be like a strobe light flash in his left eye. And I instantly knew and recognized that energetic transfer of information as being someone, some entity, I'll use a personage, someone that I had encountered in that eternal dimension. And afterwards, I did ask a question in a group session. If everything I experienced in that eternal dimension was true, I was very concerned at this point that I wasn't being deceived. And I did not want to deceive myself. And I did not, in turn, want to deceive anyone else with a false narrative. And the answer I got was yes, it was all true. It was my experience and it was all true. But the answer was yes. So that in itself was very freeing, because then I had absolutely no doubt that what I had experienced was what it was. And whether anyone else wants to believe it, that's their choice. Now, I don't think that our spirit guides tell us what to do. I think that once I realized that all these little sparks coming from the source of all creation were us at some point. This is where we were born. This is all the little souls, if you will, our inner essence, our God essence, whatever you want to call it, on the inside of us. This is where we all come from. We all contain the DNA of the Creator's energy. And so we're all the same. We're all from the same source. And so here I have the answer to a lot of my questions, but not the why I returned. That was still elusive. I hadn't quite gotten my answer to satisfy me at that point. But not being deceived, it was really, use the term, game changer for me, because it just allowed me to fully accept everything that I had been gifted. And it was a gift. But again, it was not the why. And that came 10 months later after my collapse. It's a little story about how it happened, and it involves Mary. And of course, this was still before my second collapse, so my blood pressure was really low. I was struggling to just stay awake. I'd come down in the morning and plop in my chair at the kitchen table, and Mary would always wonder if I was going to make it through the day. And that morning, I sat down and I noticed she had a notepad in her hand, and which she didn't generally have. And so she said, well, are you ready for anything, any discussion? And I said, yeah, okay, fine. And she said, well, do you want to hear what you said last night? And I said, I didn't say anything. She said, oh yeah, you did. And she said, you sat up in bed and you were mumbling to yourself. You were saying something I couldn't quite understand. Then all of a sudden you started to shake your head back and forth, saying, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And she said, she asked me, what don't you believe? And she said, I told her, I don't believe why I came back. And she said, well, why did you come back? And she said, I told her I came back to be a conduit of hope to those who don't have any or think there is any. And then she sat there quietly. And I said, what else? She said, nothing. He laid back down and went back to sleep. And that was it. Fortunately, she was prescient enough to have had a notepad beside her on the table and was able to write it down, because when she told that to me of what I said, I had my answer. I knew instantly why all of that happened the way it did. I could not come back if my collapse happened an hour earlier in our pasture. I could not come back with the hope if the EMTs, the hospital staff, or the Wellspring staff and the EMTs could not get my heart restarted. So then I had my answer as to why I'm back here. Now, I'm not going to say I'm on a mission, but this is what I've been trying to do, is explain to people what my experience was, what I saw as being out there beyond this dimension, and trying to offer it as a sense of hope, because that's what I saw, is that there is hope. That moment I collapsed back at the fitness center became a demarcation line. There was my before life, and there's my afterlife after that point. Now, I still farm. I still write. I still have to make a living. I don't get a free pass just because I had an extraordinary near-death experience. I have to still work with the same physics and economy that everyone else does. I am one of the human race. I don't get a special dispensation for having had that experience. But it did explain a lot of things to me about all of the threads of my life before my collapse. All of these threads, all of my actions, all of my choices that I made, and they were my choices. I mean, no one made them for me. I mean, I chose my different pathways. All of those eventually work themselves down to a focal point, like all of them coming in from different directions. And when I had my collapse, it was like passing through a prism, shooting through, coming out the other side with a completely different set of eyes, because everything seemed different. Time was different. Time had no meaning to me for a long time. Space was different. The world itself was different. I saw it differently. I saw things that were more in tune with nature. Not that I wasn't before, but it certainly struck me the next time I walked out into our pasture. I mean, I was almost overwhelmed, because it occurred to me that I was walking on a fertile earth. that I was probably walking in footsteps of my father, the same steps he took, and the same footsteps my grandfather took on the farm. So there was a lot of reconnection to it that I'm profoundly grateful for. But the biggest thing is understanding that this is not the end. I mean, I've realized that our bodies are really more than the sum of its parts. And by that I mean, while I was standing next to the arm curl machine, I had the same body parts, same hands, same feet, same legs, same head, eyes, as I did when I lied flat out on the floor, basically dead. Well, I was dead, they said, because my heart wasn't beating and it wasn't total death because my brain apparently was still alive. But I had all the same parts except for one thing. And that was the inner essence of me, my soul, if you will, that was now existing in an eternal dimension. And once they did restart my heart, there was a choice that I could come back or not. But apparently I was sent back because I had further work to do, and I'm okay with that. But eventually, this body will use up its fuel, and I will go on again. So there's it's a question of what I make of all this now, I think. And part of it I can explain by, I use an analogy. In 1951, I decided as an energetic being to take the energetic off ramp, and come down into this lower dimension, lower energetic dimension, which is what we live in. I was born of my parents. I was raised by them. I grew up with them. And now I spent almost 73 years enjoying and experiencing this dimension. Now, when my body uses up all its fuel, and whether that happens tomorrow or next week or 20 years from now, I have no idea. When that happens, meaning my inner essence, my soul, will get back onto that energetic on-ramp, and I'm going to go back to that eternal dimension, and I'm going to have another experience somewhere else. And I'm going to keep going and going and going, because eternity does not end. No one's going to shut the door. No one's going to put up a stop sign. You got to stop here. I'll keep going just like everyone else is. I won't be the only one on this journey. There will be billions and billions of other people as we understand people. But I do think we come to this dimension, first of all, to learn lessons that we can take with us. I think we come here to experience being in a lower energetic form so we can have the emotional engagement with others who are also, remember, have within them the same DNA as I do. We can have families. We can have tactile experiences that we can't have if we stay as that energetic spark. yeah, we could come here and exist. And I do think that we have spirit guides and angels, if you will, who are around us. I don't think they tell us what to do, but I do think that they provide the opportunity for choices. I can't explain how that works, but when you think back to the choice I made that October morning, instead of going to get the tires changed on our car, turning right, I turned left on a whim because I had time to go have a fitness session. So it was a choice. I can't tell you what the end result would have been had I gone and got the tires changed. I mean, I probably would have collapsed at some other point, maybe not in the most optimum circumstances. But I do know that the choice I made of going left and having that experience at the fitness center, collapsing there, is what has now changed my life. So when the doctors say that I got lucky, I knew it had to be more than that. There had to be an explanation. That's what took me so darn long to figure out. Excuse me for a second. Everything has a lineage. We have a physical lineage, which is our ancestry. We have an emotional lineage, which is often passed down from generation to generation. We have an attitudinal lineage. And again, that's usually something we grow up with or are taught. And I think that is just part of the human nature. But I think we have choices in how we react to those attitudes, sort of things, how we confront them, if you will. So we do have choices where we can change if we want to change. Some people don't want to change. Well, that's their choice. But it doesn't mean that those people who do make changes are different. They just have made their own choices. So it becomes a matter of acceptance. And I can say that welcoming and acceptance is one of the major things that I found in my experience in internal dimension. If I was accepted and welcomed, certainly everyone else is, because I'm no saint. I'm not a prophet. I'm just another human being who's experiencing this life for whatever time I have here yet. So again, as traumatic and chaotic as it was for the rest of my family, I'm quite grateful for the experience I had, because it has actually made me more alive than I was before, because every day is something special. Not that I didn't enjoy every other day, but basically I've learned to use the phrase, don't sweat the small stuff. The little niggly things that get under your skin every day, those just aren't worth my time. I have other things I can be thinking about, other things I can do that are more positive. So it was, the whole thing was an extraordinary, life-changing event. Physically, it wasn't so much as it was emotionally and intellectually. I mean, yeah, I collapsed and it took me a while to recover, but I think I'm in pretty good shape now, and for whatever time is left, I plan on making the most of it. But beyond all of this, of what I've just explained, the thing I learned most about my experience in that eternal dimension is that the message of God, we give this eternal source of all creation, a personage, if you will, but it's easier for communication. The message of God is love. It's that simple. For everyone. It's that simple. We are all accepted. We are all welcomed, regardless of what you may have done or don't think you have done here. That's small peanuts. We're here to learn, and not doing something or doing something that turned out wrong is a learning experience. That's why we're here. But it doesn't mean we're going to be cast aside. We are all accepted. This is not, we don't come here to be punished. We come here to learn. It's a school. And so we will take back with us things we learned here. Now, I can't tell you exactly what that will be for you or for anyone else, because we all have different experiences here. But we will take something with us, just like we've had experiences before we came here. Now, thinking about that, I do believe that I experienced more in that eternal dimension than I've possibly been able to bring back with me here and explain. And the reason I say that is when you have an infinite knowledge, I mean, anything anyone could possibly imagine as a question or an answer is all answered. There are no questions. It just is. And that's really a hard thing for a human brain to wrap itself around. Using that information that I brought back and what I didn't bring back. Say I was exposed to, I don't know, 100 trillion gigabytes of information in that dimension. And I try to bring all that back here and stuff it into my head. I don't think that my brain would be able to handle all that information. So I do think I was given enough to bring back here that I could remember and safely use and eventually understand, to explain to others. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that other people who have had experiences maybe similar to mine or their own, which might be completely different, have that access to information that they have brought back with them in varying degrees and different characteristics. I know I've read that there are people who come back as psychics, who have come back as healers, and that's their experience. And I don't question that one bit. That was not necessarily my experience. So it comes down to, I can only tell you what I experienced and let you think about that. I don't question anyone else's, because that was their experience, not mine. One of the other things that I've realized is that beyond this life, there is another one as we leave. And beyond that life, wherever we end up, there'll be another one. And another one. And why shouldn't it be that way? At least for me, because I saw these other infinite universes. So why can't we go on forever and ever in a different universe and experience something completely different from what we are doing now? That makes absolute sense to me. But the beauty of it is, we can't stop it. We cannot stop what's going to happen down the road in eternity. Yeah, we can stop our physical aspects right now if we wanted to. But our internal essence, our soul, will continue regardless of what we think about here, what we don't believe here, what we want to control here. All that is beyond an eternal dimension. It's small peanuts, basically. So I do believe we will go on to other experiences and other dimensions. I don't know what those will be, and I'm waiting to look forward to it. But it doesn't mean I want to leave tomorrow to experience it. But if I do, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. It won't be, probably as great for my family, but the end will come for us all anyway. But the end of it is that death and fear are not even concepts or even acknowledged in that eternal dimension. It's all love. It's all welcome. It's all hope. And that is our hope, that we can grab onto that while we are here to help us navigate through the challenges we have. And that's the message I have today. And I'm pleased to present it. I ask you to listen to it. I'm not going to tell you what to believe, but it was extraordinary, and this is what I have to say. So thank you for taking the time. If you have some questions, I think I'm willing to answer.
We do want to open the meeting for questions, and I'd like to recognize Kathy. Can you unmute yourself so we can hear you? You're muted right now. Can you unmute yourself, Kathy, because you're muted?
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
Okay, go ahead. We can hear you now.
I want to thank you ever so much for sharing your story. It was beautiful. I do have a couple of questions and a comment. Can we go back to the cow pasture? Do you think that it's possible the cows sensed something was wrong with you?
Well, thank you for your kind comments. I appreciate it that you enjoyed my story. Looking back on it, yes, I believe that now I understand that they recognized something either in me or behind me that did not seem familiar.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't pick up on that when I was out in the field. I just, saw that's really strange.
Sure.
And, thinking about it later on, yes, animals have, I've worked with livestock all my life. And for those of you who have pets, that you've been around for a long time, animals have a sixth sense.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
I've had cattle who came over to see me. It was like they wanted to be a friend.
Uh-huh.
So and not just one instance. There'd be those who wouldn't pay you any attention. There'd be those who would want to be in separate, small little groups by themselves. So animals are social, and I do think that they recognize something as being different that morning, and not having any idea what it was any more than I would have if somebody had explained it to me that something was going to happen an hour after that. So yeah, your question is very good, and it does resonate with me because animals pick up on a lot of stuff.
I say that because I grew up on a farm, so
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. That's why I picked that up.
Yeah.
Yes. I have
No,
another.
no.
I have another question. about the comment you made where you say, I remember very vividly things that came from the other side when you were on the other side, and you were kind of mystified as to how you remember it. I just wanted to say anything that is connected with the other side, the memory never goes away. It always is very crystal clear. Like some things have happened to me in the last even 20 years. And I can tell you exactly what happened because the memory never fades when you're dealing with this kind of stuff. And another thing I wanted to ask you is, have you ever given any thought to making a drawing of the universe as you saw it, because it's difficult for you to put it into words? And have you ever thought of maybe using paints or color crayons to use color while you're doing a drawing? It's just a suggestion because your description is very vivid. And I kept picturing a drawing with all these, the raft you were on, of all the planets and everything up in the universe going around. I just could see a beautiful drawing of all that.
Well, thank you for your comment. I'm not, I don't consider myself an artist. If I can draw a straight line or, no. That I've never considered that, but it is an interesting activity I could do. I'll have to look at that. I've not looked at it.
Those things you cannot put into words. You can put into shapes, you can put into colors, and it can tell you the story because you cannot find the words that you really need to describe it. Sorry, that was my phone.
No, that's fine.
I just wanted to make a suggestion, that was all, but your story is just authentic and it was fascinating to me.
Well, thank you. I want to come back to one point you made just before the paintings and the drawing, and I'll take a look at that, see what I can do.
Okay.
When you talked about the transfer of information from one dimension to another, I do believe there's an energetic imprint that is made upon our soul, our essence. That is why I could bring it back here, versus it just staying in that dimension. So that taught me a couple of things. Is that one, yes, there is a transfer. We can transfer from one dimension to another. Energetically, not physically, because that's not possible with our low wattage eyes and our low wattage ears and our low wattage body. But energetically, yes, I think that's true, which is also why I think the time aspect of my recovery was so confusing, because I was in a dimension where time didn't exist.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. I was just there. Yeah. And so my guess as to how long I was there, well, it felt like centuries. I mean, that's the best I can do. But yet, when we come here, we have to use time to navigate this existence. I mean, and whoever developed, the concept of using time to measure things here, how many tens of thousands of years ago, it is still confined to within this planet.
Correct.
In our universe. I mean, we assign things to other objects, like how many light years something is away, how long the sun has left until it burns itself out, 4 or 5 billion years from now. Those are human terms to get us to understand the concept of eternity, basically. Because, well, I don't think there'll be any of us around by the time the sun burns itself up, but that's the physics of this universe. Now, another universe that I saw may have completely different physics, completely different entities that exist with it. And that is part of the eternal cycle of moving to another life somewhere. I mean, maybe we just sit in front of this golden globe for the rest of our energetic existence, which is also eternity. But our concept of time here in this planet is still subordinate to eternal time.
I agree.
Because we're kind of like this little island, but yet surrounding all of this is eternal time.
Mhm.
So why shouldn't we be able to transfer ourselves from one time to another that has no time? And why shouldn't we be able to energetically move between dimensions with our internal essence, our spirit, our soul, whatever you want to call it? So yeah, very good point. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Perhaps someone here in the room or someone on Zoom? I have a lot of questions and comments, but I want to give everyone else a chance first. But let me start. Philip, I'm interested in knowing if you came to all this understanding of your experience by your own reflections within yourself, or if you studied books and the experiences of others.
Good question. No, this was all by my own investigation. My thought, my consideration, my logic, if you will, or unlogic, because some of it was not logical at the time. But no, I purposely avoided, when I started writing out my thoughts, I purposely avoided reading any books or anyone else's NDE experience after I learned that there were others, mainly because I wanted to make sure I could get mine down on paper first and not be influenced by anyone else's experience. And so I basically just, I don't want to say I dismissed everything. I just didn't pursue other stories because I wanted to get mine as clear as I could. And so make it as pure of my experience as I possibly could.
The reason I asked is because, well, it's just supported by a common concept that we've studied here, is that all the knowledge is really within us, and we can find it within. And I was going to suggest, I wondered if you'd ever considered having a session of hypnosis where you could talk to your higher self, or your higher self could talk to you, and come to even a greater understanding of your experience.
I have, short answer, no, I haven't considered it. Second answer, would I? Possibly. Yeah, I haven't quite reached that point in my life yet where I'm willing to take that step. Now, I'm a little bit hesitant about hypnosis. Not that I think there's anything wrong with it, but I'm not to that stage yet.
All right, I will send you some information and a possible contact for that for your consideration.
Okay.
Over your experience, you saw billions of persons like yourself on these energetic waves. Some persons have described the in-between life between the afterlife and earthly life as I wonder if that's perhaps where you were on that raft in between. I just wonder.
Well, that's an interesting question. All I can say is that 1 moment, I was standing upright looking at my forearms. In the next moment, I was sitting on this so-called raft. I did not recall to this day anything in between that. I mean, it's like I instantly took off and went somewhere, left everything behind.
Right.
In fact, I didn't even realize that I had died. It was a no thing. It wasn't something that even occurred to me. Now I know there are since I've written my book, I've been able to free myself up to look at other accounts, and I know people. There are people who say they've met their parents, grandparents. They've met. Well, some have said they've met Jesus, which is fine. I didn't have that experience that I remember. Now it may come back, or I may be shown it later that I did, and I don't know. But I can't say at this point that I met anybody else there other than me.
You described your experience as being purposeful so that you could be a conduit of hope. And so I accept, and it seems logical, that your experience contained all those elements to enable you to be that conduit of hope. And that's why and when and where is all explained in that. It was all designed to enable you to be that conduit of hope. That seems logical from all that you've told us.
Well, I don't know yet at this stage what the process is for our spiritual selves, our energetic self in another dimension, decisions that are made to come here or to go anywhere for that matter. I don't know what the mechanism is, if there is one. Again, we're back to using human concepts and terminology to try and understand a system, if you will, and I hate to use the word system, but of a dimension where energy is instantly knowable and instantly given, that there's no need for basically communication. As we understand communication and vocabulary, I'm fascinated by how that happens, but I don't know how it does.
No, how it happens is not clear, but that it does happen seems evident by your experience, by the experience of others. It was clearly defined. And I wonder if we could all extrapolate from that every one of us is living a life that has been carefully planned. And if we have such an experience as yours, that too is planned for a purpose. And so we're living in the care of, as you saw, your guides. We all have guides and they all care for us. And it's all planned, as you have described, for our own soul development, as you've described through this realm, perhaps another realm and another realm after that. That's what makes sense to me. But what also makes sense is, even though you have not resorted to other sources to learn all these things, you looked within, but you have come up with the answers that everybody else has come up with by tapping all the other resources and studying what other people have said. So I find that all that you have said is highly accurate, especially about God, starting with the fundamental concept that God is love. You saw God as that brilliant ball of light. You saw sparks coming out from the ball. Those are all of us sources or sparks, same essence as God, coming out for our own experience in all the realms that you have described. You didn't say that you saw sparks returning to the source. Others have said they saw sparks returning too. And I wonder if you did.
No, I can't, at this point, I cannot say I did while I was there. Now, they may have, and I didn't see them as in acknowledge or know that they were present. I'd like to come back to something you mentioned about the plan that we have. I think that somewhere in that eternal dimension, if we choose to come to this lower dimension, that there are plans that are made. I can't tell you what they are. I don't know how that works. But I do think that we are given free choice. Once I saw these sparks move away from this source of all creation, to me, my interpretation of that is that we individuated at that point. Even though we contain the DNA of the source of all creation, of God, if you will, we now were separate to make whatever plans, choices we wanted to make, especially when we came and lowered ourselves into this lower energetic dimension. I think we're given free will. I think the choices we make in the back of our soul's mind may be the plan. But I think that when we're confronted with choices, we make what our, well, I want to say our egos want to make, what our human purpose may be to want to make. Is that in the grand plan? I can't say. I have no idea. But I think that we are given the choice to make our choices. And I think that is part of the whole learning process.
In one of his books, Dr. Michael Newton describes the soul plan that one soul made in consultation with higher guides for an incarnation, and planned the mind, planned the body, planned the events, the challenges that soul would face on the earth. And that was the greatest explanation. That was the explanation in greatest detail that I've ever read about how a soul comes in. Of course, everybody has their own individual plan, just as you have said. Well, those are the things that I really wanted to ask you about, and I thank you for answering. Let me see if there's someone else who has a question. Joanne.
Could I just comment on your comment, Dick?
Of course.
We may have all those plans, and they may be given to us. We may negotiate them. We may, include them in what we want to do here. But everything we are given or experience or plan in that eternal dimension is done with love. It's not done with hate. It's not done with punishment in mind in case you don't do what you're supposed to do. All I know is that whatever plans are made, it's all done with love for that individual soul, that individual essence. And that's you, that's me, that's the one next to us in the car driving down the road. And that's why we're here. We're here to acknowledge the divinity in everyone else. And if we did that, we wouldn't have any problems at all. But because we don't acknowledge that in another person or groups of persons, that's where our problems come from. So we do have a choice. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
That affirms what Neil Donald Walsh wrote in his book's Conversation with God, is that God gives us complete freedom, but we have unlimited potential within that freedom. And our potential is, in as much as we are sparks from the source, is that we'd fan our flame and grow to be a larger light and larger love. And so that would be our maturity as we're growing up into love. All right, let me ask Joanne now. You've unmuted yourself. You had a question or a comment?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious. You said that you know there's spirit guides. Now, did they communicate with you at all?
Yes, in a way that it was both energetically and through a conscious channel who could verbalize their message. And the best way I can explain this is that the spirit guides have non-vocabulary, as we understand words and vocabulary, expression. By transmitting and transferring that energetic information, channeling it through a human body with the same physical aspects where you can enlighten the message, the words. It's like going through a filter that now they have these programs on computers where you can talk into it and it prints it out. So you think about an energetic message coming into a human body and then it verbalizing into words that you and I can understand. Okay, that's the background to how I understand how all this works. So the first time that I encountered what I considered to be not necessarily my spirit guides, but a spirit guide, which I think is a I don't want to say conglomeration, but a coupling of many essences on the other side who bring this knowledge, and they acknowledged me with that strobe light flash. I didn't even have to ask what it was. I instantly knew that's who I had met somewhere before. The second time was when I was at another workshop with the same conscious channel, and I was trying to understand if I was supposed to do anything with this all these papers I had written my story out on. And I asked, well, am I supposed to write about this? And the answer came back very quickly, yes, yes, yes. And so that validated what I had experienced, because I don't believe the spirit guides would tell me to continue if I had written something that wasn't true. I think they would have just said, no, don't do it. And now that's my perception of it. So having gotten to that point where I was had written some stuff about my experience and everything that I explained to you, and probably there's more detail in my book, but having gotten it to that point and they said yes, I think that was the go-ahead message, that at least what I took, that it was all accurate, it was all the way it happened, it was all true, and that they were in some way satisfied with that message being out there in the way I had framed it.
Yeah, I have found that to be true. And I like the way you described how their language is interpreted into your brain or your body somehow. I've often wondered that myself. So thank you very much. You verified so much with my experience with what you've just said.
Good,
thank you.
Good. I'm pleased, and we're on a similar journey. I mean, each one of us have a different journey, but we're all moving together to greater enlightenment of ourselves and what we're here to do, and how we can interact with others, and particularly give people hope where, I think that's needed. So thank you for your comments. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Is there someone else who has a comment or a question? Well, while you're thinking, I just want to tell you what the plan is. I am recording this session and it'll be recorded. It's being recorded to my Zoom cloud. And a little bit later today, I'll be receiving a message that the cloud recording is available. And I'm going to be sending out a notice to everyone where it can be viewed. And I'm going to send a summary of what Philip has told us today along with that notice. And so I thank you all for joining us today. And I'm open for any other questions or comments.
Oh, if you have time, I have one.
Go ahead. We have plenty of time.
Okay. I mentioned before that without Mary's help, my wife's help, I wouldn't be, I think, in the situation I am now. The after effects of an NDE and how it affects everyone around you. I was oblivious to a lot of stuff that was going on at home because I was still in this euphoric stage of, oh man, why do I want to be here? And it came across later when Mary and I discussed it. It came across as I was almost not wanting to be grateful for what she had done. And it wasn't taken that way by her, but she just posed the question. And so there is more to it than just the person who has the NDE. There's a whole lot of other extraneous things that go on in that kind of a situation. I don't think, even though it was an individual thing for me, Mary couldn't understand what I had experienced. I could explain it, yeah, but she could not get the same feelings, the same emotion, because every time I think about that dimension I was in and what I experienced, I still get this welling of warmth and love within me. I mean, it just kind of washes through me. And I can't transfer that to someone else. I can say what it is. But again, you're using human words to try to explain something that is extraordinary. And I'm going to put a plug in here. One of the things that we proposed to the VBIANDS group for their conference was having someone explain what happens to the other person, the after effects. And Mary and I are going to be on a panel in Phoenix in August, talking about the after effects and her perspective of it and how it has impacted our lives. Because there was a period of time when, well, I didn't know that we were going to make it together because she thought I was oblivious to most stuff. I mean, she'd bring a stack of bills and I'd look at it and say, so what? And these were things that had to be paid to keep going. And she at first thought I didn't care. So there was, for me, a learning experience of trying to be more emphatic. Empathetic is the word I want, empathetic with her and what she was going through. I had no idea that she was going through what she was going through. And one day she dropped a stack of papers in front of me and said, well, this may explain some of it. It was all of the emails that she kept from day one to whenever this was, several months later, trying to update my family, our friends, reading the doctor reports, trying to keep abreast of what was going on in not only our lives, but on the farm, getting stuff scheduled to be done when I couldn't do it. So it'll be, the panel will be an exploration of some of this stuff. And I know that they do video those and put them up on their website later later on sometime after the conference. So for those of you viewing this who are interested in another aspect of it, a spouse or partners or family members, that may be something you'd want to tune into later. I've told Mary she's got her own story to write, and I hope she does, because there are a lot of people out there who I think could resonate with her message and what she went through and how she was able to basically survive it all. So anyway, that was the point I wanted to make. So,
Okay, I have unmuted now. I have a small group and we're working on this too. And one of the things I've come across is a reading of Ray Stanford in a book called Speak, Shining Stranger. And in one of the chapters, he says that we can transfer the energy or the feeling of love and even a healing energy to other people. And he describes how this might happen. And it starts with devotion for one wanting to draw closer to God. And then as one looks within, you try to connect with the oneness of all that is. And you sit with your back straight so that all your energy centers are in a row. And you can feel the buildup of energy within yourself. And it starts from the lower chakras and goes up. And you can feel this. And then when you think of someone, you transfer that energy to that person. And that person might be able to feel it. I'd like to do more experiments with this, but that's in essence what he said. So I'm thinking perhaps you can share with Mary the energy of your experience in that way.
okay, thank you. Yeah.
Well, any closing comments from anyone or any question? Thank you, Philip. We are so grateful that you're present with us today and shared your story, answered our questions, and we'll keep in touch.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dick, and to your group. I really appreciate your interest in my story. I'm very pleased to have shared it, and I wish you all well in the future.
All right, Perry has a question. Perry,
Okay.
you need to unmute first. We can't see you and we can't hear you, but we're patient. I know you could hear me. In the lower part of your screen, you'll see a microphone with a line through it. You want to click on that, that'll help you unmute. No, you're not unmuted yet. Okay, I was clapping. Okay, she says I was clapping. That's her chat. Very well. That's all she needed. Well, thank you all for attending today. We'll see you next time, which will be on July 13th. It's the second Saturday in July because we're going to try to avoid the holiday weekend. And there's a flyer and everybody will get information by this through email from me. Thank you all.
Okay, well, thank you again.
Right. Are we ready to close? We are. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.